And moving along, as we near the end of our presentation today, we have our event's keynote address speaker. So please welcome to the stage the lead consultant for world languages and international education from the Ohio Department of Education, Mr. Ryan Wertz.
早上好. And good morning for those of you like me who really aren't Chinese speakers. What a great day to be here in Cleveland on the campus of Cleveland State University. Although I live and work in Columbus, and I'm down at the Ohio Department of Education right there in downtown Columbus, you might be surprised to learn that I actually grew up here in northeastern Ohio, just south of Cleveland and just outside of Medina. So Cleveland was the big city for me growing up, and it's always great to be back in this part of the state where I had my beginnings. I hope you all had a wonderful and very pleasant drive to campus. It was a very beautiful morning as I was shooting up I-71 from Columbus. The leaves are changing, and thankfully there wasn't a whole lot of traffic, so I was actually able to get here in pretty good time and with very little stress. That's not always the case when you're driving into Cleveland at the tail end of rush hour. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I've had the pleasure of serving the state of Ohio as the lead consultant for world languages and international education for the past 11 years. And this for me is kind of like my dream job, because I get to go out and support language and culture learning around the state, K-12, and I get to come to events like this where I see amazing educators and administrators working so hard to help our young people gain truly invaluable skills that they will take out into the world with them and hopefully do amazing things for our state, for our country, and for our planet. So just to tell you, where I'm coming from and a little bit about what I get to do, they actually pay me to do that, and I have fun every day in my job, and it's amazing. I have to say that I've had the great fortune to travel to China 14 times now over the course of the past 11 years. My first trip to China was back in 2006. And like many Americans going to China for the very first time, I really didn't know what I was going to find or what I could expect. I had many images in my mind that I had taken from the press over the course of my youth and teen years, but I have to say that when I actually landed in China and started driving down that beautiful tree-lined boulevard into Beijing, I didn't really find what I expected. It was a wonderful surprise, actually, to find this vibrant country on the move, this culture that was just brimming with energy and vitality, and I was hooked immediately. I have to admit, though, before I got on the plane, a little nervousness, because I was going someplace where I actually didn't speak the language, and I didn't know, would I be able to communicate, would I be able to not only survive, but take care of the business that I had to do on behalf of the state of Ohio when I got there. And I found that my worries were needless, and that my experiences every single time that I've been to China have been truly magnificent. I'm very grateful for all of those people who have hosted me and welcomed me so warmly, and it's truly amazing. Over those 14 trips to China, I've literally been all over the country. Not only have I been to Beijing, but my travels took me to Kunming, as our young gentlemen earlier were telling us about, Tianjin, Shanghai, Hangzhou, Suzhou, Xi'an, Wuhan, Taiyuan, Qingdao, Guilin, and Luzhou. So many more places to visit, but it's truly been an experience to get to know China in the different regions and the different cities and the people all over that country. Our state is very lucky to depend on the services, the resources, and especially the expertise for very special and for very different Confucius Institutes located at the University of Akron, University of Toledo, at Miami University down in Oxford, Ohio, and of course right here in Cleveland at Cleveland Cleveland State University. I feel so very honored today to have been invited up from Columbus to attend this very auspicious event and to speak to all of you this morning. I'd like to take this opportunity to extend my sincere thanks to Dr. Shu Yan, Associate Director Zhang Shu Hong, and all of the Institute staff for inviting me and for allowing me to share a few words with you this morning, which I hope will serve to inspire, but also serve to express my sincere gratitude for all of the hard work that all of you are doing to bring Chinese language and culture alive for students across Northeast Ohio and beyond. Before I delve into my main presentation, I would be very remiss if I did not formally acknowledge the reason we have all come together today. Although the famous man pictured on the screen was born roughly 2,568 years ago, if I have done my math correctly, his philosophy and teachings continue to have a profound influence on many facets of our lives today. This influence extends far beyond China. At the very heart of the mission of the Office of Chinese Language Council International, which we all know more commonly as the Hanban, lies Confucian thought and influence. Not only do we benefit from the work of the academic centers around this country that bear the name of Confucius, but we also benefit from the services of outstanding guest educators who have left home to come and work in our classrooms. Could I ask anyone in the room who is currently a visiting university professor from China to please stand and be recognized? Please, if you are a visiting professor from China. How about anyone in the room who is a guest teacher currently working in an elementary, middle, or high school? Could I ask all of you to please stand? Yes, they deserve a hearty round of applause. It's really, really hard to leave your family and leave your friends and the comforts of your life very far away to come to the U.S. to work in an educational system and a culture that are vastly different from your own. So I congratulate you for your braveness in coming to the United States and working with our students and with our colleagues. You have no idea how much we truly appreciate your presence here. Something you probably wouldn't know about me also is that I spent the first 9 years of my career in education working overseas as a volunteer teacher. I know a little something about what you all are doing here. I know exactly the types of challenges that you face because I've done the very same thing beginning in Asia, in the Philippines, where I served 2 years as a U.S. Peace Corps volunteer, and later in Central America in both Panama and Costa Rica, where I again served as a Peace Corps volunteer and then served to train Peace Corps volunteers. I would say honestly that we simply couldn't have made the progress that we've made in Ohio in Chinese without the participation of our friends from overseas. And I hope that those of you who are in the room know how very grateful I am and how very grateful we are at the Ohio Department of Education for the great sacrifices that you've made to be here with us in Ohio. Now, could I have all the other Chinese teachers in the room please stand? Because I know there are many of you out there. Please stand and be recognized. All right, thank you. And now could I have anyone who supports Chinese teachers in a different role? For example, in an administrative or a particular support role, would you all please stand and be recognized? So our principals, our superintendents, our curriculum directors, our other support staff, thank you all so much for making Chinese a true possibility for students in Ohio. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, could anyone in the room who is currently a Chinese student please stand up and be recognized? Oh, that's outstanding. Wonderful. Okay. Kids, I know that sometimes learning Chinese can be very difficult, but I hope you know that you're gaining skills that employers and our government really need people to have. I want to encourage all of you to stick with it. because it takes many years of study and practice to gain the level of fluency in the language that will actually allow you to go out and perform a job or integrate into a community successfully. It takes time, it takes dedication, but I'm confident that you all have that and will work forward through the years to become very fluent in this beautiful language. I'd like to now turn your attention to the work being done around the state in relation to Chinese language and culture learning at the K-12 level. My hosts have asked me to examine with you the current trends in Ohio related to the development of Chinese language programs. So on the next several slides that I'm going to share with you, you're going to see some data that we've captured, which will provide interesting insights into world language learning as it has evolved over the past decade or so. What I can tell you is that since 2006, when the state settled on Chinese as the critical language to promote statewide, the number of students learning Chinese in the Buckeye State has increased exponentially. Scenes like the one showing up on the screen right now were very rare prior to 2006. Nowadays, classrooms like this one can be found all over the state and are becoming increasingly familiar to students everywhere. So, let's dig in and see what we can learn about Chinese language learning Ohio today. All right, I'd like to start by sharing this slide, which shows the number of languages that we teach to K-12 students in Ohio. You'll notice that that number really hasn't varied very much over time. You can see that back in the 2004-2005 school year, when we first began collecting world language data, 13 world languages were being offered to K-12 students around the state. Fast forward to the most recent data we have, which is for the 2015-2016 academic year. It takes us about a year to crunch the numbers and actually make them public. That's why we're running, or it appears that we're running well behind. You can see that the number is relatively unchanged, with only a little variation during the years in between. With regard to the languages that Ohio K-12 students are typically learning, you can see on this slide the alphabetical list of those 13 languages from the last slide that are offered in Ohio currently. If you're unfamiliar with the abbreviation ASL, that stands for American Sign Language, which is also officially recognized as a world language by Ohio law. Please do notice that Chinese appears on the list, just as it has ever since we began collecting data 13 years ago. While Chinese is a brand new language in K-12 classrooms in many states, Putonghua has been taught in Ohio for many years. In fact, we're aware of at least one Chinese program that's been in existence for at least 20 years, or was in existence for 20 years prior to the start of our state data collection. So Chinese was rare back then, but it was not totally unknown. Okay, this next slide gives us some sense of the overall health of K-12 language learning. As you can see, the number of students taking a world language during any given school year spiked right around the 2010-2011 school year. Unfortunately, if you recall, the U.S. economy was suffering from the effects of a severe recession, and as a result, many districts had to scale back their language programs to help balance their budgets. Combined with the fact that many Americans simply don't understand the benefits of learning another language, only about 19% of Ohio's 1,750,000 K-12 students are enrolled in any language course, elementary through high school, in any given school year. 19%. Overall, only 42% of Ohio graduates have ever taken a world language course at any time during their K-12 years. This is less than half of all students graduating from Ohio high schools. As far as what this means for Chinese teachers, though, I'm a glass half full, silver lining to the cloud kind of guy. What this means is if you're trying to build your programs, there are currently a lot of students out there to market your programs to who aren't currently taking any world language at all during their K-12 years. All right? So that's my positive spin on otherwise fairly dismal numbers. And our Ohio numbers are not anything vastly different from the national averages. In fact, our numbers are very much representative of the national average. This slide presents another view of the annual percentage of students studying world languages. Some good news, despite that big curve you saw on the last slide, the percentage of students taking a language during any given year has followed that same year and has remained fairly steady. I have to say that although you see that curve going downwards, the overall total of students in K-12 is also going downward. So it's not quite as dire as that slide perhaps made it seem. All right, now, part of my assignment this morning is to share with you where we've been in the past in terms of K-12 Chinese language learning, and also where we're headed. So let me take you back to the 2005-2006 school year, the year that I began working at the Ohio Department of Education. Take a look with me at the enrollment data for that year by language. All right, at the top, no big surprise. We all know that Spanish is by far and away the most subscribed language in the state, followed by French and German, and that's been relatively unchanged for as long as we've been taking, or as long as we've been collecting K-12 data. Then you see exploratory. Exploratory is a kind of a language experience course, generally offered in the elementary school and in some middle schools. Those exploratory courses are kind of the bane of my existence because they're designed to make people feel good about language, but they're not really designed to promote any type of proficiency in a language. For me, a waste of resources, quite honestly. Let's put our money into proficiency-based programs. Enough, I'll get off my stump here. After that, you see Latin, American Sign Language, Japanese, Italian, Arabic, Russian, all the way down to number 11 in 2005-2006, where you see that during that school year, we recorded 493 students studying Chinese across the state out of 1.8 million students at the time. All right? Not so great. And of course, rounding out the list, Hebrew, Swahili, Greek, and Polish. And some of those languages aren't currently being offered. All right, let's skip ahead to our most recent data year, which is for the 2015-2016 academic year. So we're fast forwarding 10 years later than the numbers we just saw. The thing that should jump out at you is that although the total number of students taking a world language declined by more than 13,500 plus students during that 10-year period, the number of students taking Chinese increased by more than 10,000 students. Now that's pretty remarkable. Right? So let's take a look specifically at the yearly data for Chinese to get a better sense of the incredible growth rate that we've observed over the past decade. As we look at this slide, it almost looks like the data are depicting a mountain of Chinese. All right? As you can see, the numbers rose rapidly as districts around the state realized the importance of offering their students the option of taking less commonly taught languages, like Chinese. Notice that the number of students taking Chinese was virtually unchanged until the 2007-2008 school year, which is when the sudden rise in K-12 Chinese enrollment really took root. So the question that you're probably asking yourself right now is simply, what happened to cause such a dramatic change in Ohio's Chinese enrollment? So there are two specific reasons that kind of can account for the increase in K-12 Chinese. First, in 2006, the National Committee on Economic Development issued a very provocative report titled Education for Global Leadership, which, among other things, recommended vastly increasing the ability of Americans to communicate in less commonly taught languages, including Mandarin Chinese. The Ohio Department of Education, under the direction of then State Superintendent Susan Taves-Zellman, heeded that call, and after examining the resources available in the state to support a critical language initiative, determined that we were best equipped here in the Buckeye State to support a Chinese language initiative. Over the course of 4 years, beginning in fall of 2006, the department partnered with the National East Asian Resource Center at The Ohio State University, as well as the OSU Chinese Language Flagship Program and other early partners to hold a series of annual symposia for school and district decision makers in order to educate them about the need for increasing our state's capacity in Chinese language and to put them in touch with resource providers that could help them to initiate strong programs. The second factor that played heavily into the rapid increase in K-12 Chinese language enrollment was the formal relationship that developed between the College Board and the Asia Society in New York City and the Hanban. While the idea of expanding Chinese programs was a good one, the main challenge was, and quite simply put, continues to be, the lack of highly qualified teachers to fill all of the Chinese teaching positions that have opened up over the years as more and more schools have added Chinese language and culture programs. This strategic partnership resulted in a number of high-profile initiatives, including the Chinese Guest Teacher Program, the development of the Confucius Institute network, and the Confucius Classrooms program, all of which have helped increase our ability to support our many new programs. That 2006-2007 school year was also the first year that Chinese teachers, guest teachers, were assigned to work in Ohio. In fact, I see one in the far corner of the room with our pioneer teacher, who is still with us after all these years. Please stand and be recognized. All right, that year they initiated Chinese language programs in Chagrin Falls and Shaker Heights here in the Cleveland area, as well as programs in Belpre down in southern Ohio and Tip City out in the Dayton area of western Ohio. All right, since then, 84 guest teachers from all over China have been assigned to work in Ohio schools. Over the years, many of them have been given the challenge of initiating new programs with limited funding and resources. But despite those challenges, as well as the great challenges of simply adapting to a new culture and a very confusing new educational system, our guest teachers have flourished. And so too have many of the programs that they've initiated in all regions of the state. Those 84 guest teachers who have come through the College Board's Chinese Guest Teacher Program have been assigned in 47 different districts, contributing significantly to the growth of programs across the state. When you include the number of guest teachers who have also been brought in by the 4 university Confucius Institutes that are operating in our state, the impact becomes even more pronounced. I'm very pleased to report that over the last decade, a number of Ohio universities have added Chinese teacher licensure programs to help boost our capacity to supply our own domestically trained Chinese teachers. And as a result of those efforts, our dependency on foreign guest educators has been steadily declining. However, these guest teacher programs remain a vital part of our overall Ohio plan to increase capacity in Chinese. With regard to where Chinese is being taught in Ohio, it's literally just about everywhere geographically. Currently, Chinese can be found in 107 Ohio school districts and community schools. That's approximately 1/6 of all Ohio school districts. There are a variety of reasons why districts decide to implement Chinese programs. In some, there's a significant Chinese heritage population, and it makes sense to offer Chinese to the heritage community children. In others, savvy administrators who realize that proficiency in Chinese will be an invaluable career skill for their graduates to take with them out into the world. There are districts in Ohio where parents have had this same realization, and they've lobbied their school boards to add Chinese programs. And in still other districts, the reason is, very simply put, neighbor envy. The people in the next district over are offering this cool language, Chinese, and we're not. We need to compete, let's have it. Hey, that works for me. Whatever the reason, We're very pleased that so many districts are offering their students the opportunity to have an important Asian language option among the other more traditional language options that most schools offer. At the department, we always strongly encourage our Ohio schools and districts to offer Chinese in addition to, rather than at the expense of, other world language options. And our message is that all languages are valuable and important. In my position at the Ohio Department of Education, I have the opportunity to get out and observe the great things that are happening in Ohio's world language classrooms. And I'm always very pleased when I have the opportunity to visit Chinese language classrooms in particular. One of the things that I like most about these visits is that our Ohio students prove over and over and over again that Chinese, although challenging, is not nearly as difficult as many people would make it out to be. I'm always particularly happy when I visit districts like the one you see pictured here in this slide, where Chinese is offered to students beginning in the elementary grades. Given the complexity of the language, it definitely makes the most sense to offer Chinese beginning with the very youngest students. Unlike Spanish and French, which are classified as level 1 difficulty languages for native English speakers, Chinese is classified as a level 4 difficulty language, the most challenging type of language for native English speakers to learn. The character-based alphabet and the tonal nature of the language means that native English-speaking learners of Chinese will require at least 3 to 4 times the amount of time to advance from one level of proficiency to the next. District decision makers often don't understand this important distinction between languages and then question the effectiveness of their Chinese teachers when they don't observe the same progress in the students who are taking Chinese compared to the students who are taking other languages, particularly the Romance and Germanic languages. Students typically need 5 to 7 years to make the same proficiency gains in Chinese as they make after taking 3 years of Spanish, French, German, Italian, Portuguese, and so on. Districts that are serious about building their Chinese students' proficiency quickly figure out that they need to back the start of their Chinese programs down into the earlier grades in order to ensure their students' success. These aspects of learning Chinese need to also be explained to parents who often have unrealistic expectations for their kids when it comes to learning Chinese. All languages are not equal in terms of their difficulty, and they should not be treated as such. One of the reasons I wanted to include images like the last one and this one, where young children are taking Chinese, is to really drive home this point of students developing a level of proficiency that will actually benefit them later in life, either in college or in their careers. While it often looks to the untrained eye like kids are playing in their early language classes, foreign language and elementary teachers, or plus teachers as we call them in the profession, are actually using very sound pedagogy to not only build their learners' love of the language and culture, but to also put in place a strong foundation for the development of literacy and communication skills over time. The best model, of course, for learning any language the most expediently is the immersion model, where students learn the content from the different subjects such as math, science, social studies, the fine arts, and so on in the target language beginning as early as kindergarten or first grade. We are absolutely thrilled that Ohio now has its first Chinese language immersion program at the Global Ambassadors Language Academy right here in Cleveland, over on the west side. The Chinese and Spanish language immersion programs at Gala join the other 11 immersion programs in the state, and we wish our friends at Gala the best of luck as they continue to grow their program grade by grade over the next couple of years. It's important as a state to consider the benefits of the immersion model when it comes to offering level 4 difficulty languages like Chinese, because only through intensive long-term programs will our students attain a high enough level of proficiency to be useful on the job or at the university level for research and collaboration purposes. Here's a fun little chart to share with you, and I apologize if the print is probably relatively very small for some of you. My older eyes would struggle to see that. This proficiency levels in the workplace chart that you see was researched and prepared by the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages. I included this information to help you understand where typical K-12 Chinese language learners in Ohio generally end up in terms of their ability to use the language in a future academic or work setting, depending on how long they study the language. If you look closely, you'll see the middle column lists the types of jobs our graduates can do at the various levels of proficiency. Pay close attention to the fact that they can't hold even the most basic and menial of jobs until they're at least at the intermediate mid-level of proficiency. So, let's take a look at how many years it takes learners of level 4 difficulty languages like Chinese to climb the proficiency chart and qualify for different types of jobs. As you can see, students who take 3 years of the language, the amount needed to qualify for an Ohio honors diploma, by the way, only reach the novice high level of proficiency, quite short of any real ability to use the language in an academic or work setting. It takes students approximately 5 years to reach the intermediate low level of proficiency in all 4 language skills of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Only after 9 to 10 years of study, after 7 to 8 years of language study, they reach the intermediate mid-level of proficiency. Notice this equates to the most menial and low-paying types of jobs. Sales clerk, cashier, attendant, and so forth. Not something that most of our youth aspire to be, if they can help it. Only after 9 to 10 years of study will students attain the intermediate high level of proficiency. It's at this level that the related jobs begin to become less menial. And it's also here at the intermediate high level of proficiency where Ohio has set the bar in terms of the level of language proficiency required to earn our state's new seal of biliteracy, which I will be talking a little bit about here in just a moment. As I mentioned, we have just one K-12 Mandarin immersion program in Ohio, and these are the students that will have the best chance of attaining the advanced low level of proficiency or higher during their K-12 years. The reason I'm sharing this information with you is that I want to help you understand that it does take a significant amount of time and focused study for learners to attain the very minimal level of proficiency associated with true bilingualism and biliteracy. Okay, that last slide takes me to my last major point of the morning, the future of Chinese language teaching and learning in the U.S. I chose this particular cartoon because it captures the angst and the sense of insecurity that many Americans feel with regard to the reemergence of China in the international political arena. While I don't believe personally the U.S. has any reason at all for fear, I do believe China will continue to be a major global player for many years to come. And I feel that Americans would be wise to take the time and expend the resources to promote better understanding and collaboration with our Chinese neighbors here on planet Earth. We can all do this by supporting the learning of Chinese and sharing the deeper facets of Chinese culture with our young people in order to promote improved understanding and cooperation. Personally, I believe the immersion programming, along with the increasingly innovative use of technology, will be the wave of the future when it comes to Chinese language and culture learning. Immersion techniques have been proven over and over again in the research to render the very best language proficiency and interculturality development results. And with technology, students in even the smallest and most remote corners of the state can have access to a variety of online and blended learning possibilities. I'm very pleased to be representing both the Ohio Department of Education and my own national professional organization, the National Council of State Supervisors for Languages, on one of the advisory boards of the U.S.-China Strong Foundation. With its very ambitious goal of having 1 million K-12 students in the U.S. learning Chinese by the year 2020, this program is pushing stakeholders around the country to improve and expand their capacities to support Chinese language learning at the K-12 level and beyond. Currently, the Foundation and its partners estimate that between 400 and 500,000 K-12 students are currently learning Chinese in one way or another. This is up from less than 200,000 students just a couple of years ago when the Foundation was in its infancy. I do think it's possible that we could see upwards of 20,000 K-12 students learning in Chinese in Ohio in the next 3 to 5 years if we refocus our advocacy efforts and also support the continued growth of the programs that have already been started. It's hard to say whether or not we'll actually see 1 million K-12 students learning Chinese by the year 2020, but I think we absolutely must celebrate the fact that the number has nearly tripled in just a few short years. It's really rather astounding, isn't it? I applaud all of you for your efforts and tireless dedication, which have contributed to this very noteworthy accomplishment. As we consider the future and the right now, this brings up an interesting question. Given the fact that Chinese is now the 4th most subscribed language by students in Ohio, and also given the fact that the language is experiencing a similar rise in enrollment around the country, with more students now taking Chinese than languages like Latin and American Sign Language, which have never been referred to as less commonly taught languages, is it time to graduate Chinese to the status of commonly taught language? I leave that out there for you to ponder. I think this one question captures the sense of excitement and optimism surrounding this language, which will carry on well into the future. When a language can no longer be called less commonly taught, you know that it's graduated to the big leagues. I'd like to conclude my remarks today by sharing a couple of important announcements and useful resources with the educators and administrators who are in the room today. First, I'd like to talk just very briefly and take this opportunity to announce the state's newest world language-related program, one that maybe you've heard about, called the Ohio Seal of Biliteracy Program. In enacting legislation that creates a state seal of biliteracy, Ohio became the 25th state to offer its graduates the opportunity to showcase their linguistic skills and cultural knowledge for post-secondary institutions, for military recruiters, or for prospective employers. So what exactly is a seal of biliteracy? Sounds fancy, sounds nice. Basically, this is an award that will be conferred on graduating high school seniors who can demonstrate a very high level of proficiency in both English and at least one world language, including modern languages, classical languages, and Native American languages. The Seal of Biliteracy will be awarded by local schools or districts, and they'll do this in consultation with the Ohio Department of Education to ensure that the criteria for earning the award have been fully met. There's very much a lot of excitement going on out in the field about this initiative, and a strong sense of urgency to make the award available as soon as possible. Recognizing this urgency, the Ohio Department of Education has developed an accelerated timeline to get our Seal of Biliteracy program up and running as soon as possible. Our work during the past winter of 2017 centered on collecting initial input from a stakeholder advisory committee. This input helped guide the department in drafting an Ohio Administrative Code rule as was required by Senate Bill 3, the piece of legislation that established the Seal of Biliteracy program. After we finished drafting the rule, we made it available to the public for comment and subsequently analyzed those comments and revised the draft rule accordingly. Following that, we presented the draft rule to the State Board's Achievement and Graduation Requirements Committee for pre-approval before we presented it to the entire State Board of Education for its approval. At the same time, we were working with the State Board on the Ohio Administrative Code rule. We also began working on the full set of requirements for earning Seal of Biliteracy, as well as the guidance that schools and districts will require to implement the program. Currently, the Ohio Legislature's Joint Committee on Agency Rule Review is reviewing that rule approved by the State Board of Education. During this time, we continue to finalize the requirements for students to earn a Seal of Biliteracy, as well as the guidance that we'll provide to schools and districts wishing to implement the program. I will mention that the program is voluntary. It is not a mandated program. We're also beginning to develop a professional development module that we'll use to roll out the program across the state once all of these approvals have been given. Ideally, if everything goes according to plan and we encounter no major roadblocks, the program should be in place later this year in time for students in the class of 2018 to avail to the program. In terms of helping students prepare for earning a seal of biliteracy, we offer these 3 pieces of advice. Tell them about the opportunity to earn a seal of biliteracy before the foreign language course sequence begins in your school or district. This way, students can understand what's involved in earning a seal and plan their coursework accordingly over the next years. Secondly, make sure you're using the target language at least 80% of the time every day in class. Only by giving students constant, comprehensible input can we expect them to attain the high level of proficiency that will be required to earn an Ohio Seal of Biliteracy. Finally, plan backwards from an AP or an IB caliber course to build articulated sequences of proficiency-based learning in order to build your students' communicative abilities to a high level of proficiency. This is the only way to get students to a high enough level of proficiency to ensure that they qualify for the award. Do stay tuned for more information about the program's specific requirements and for guidance to help your school or district implement the program if you should decide to participate. The department will be activating a Seal of Biliteracy webpage with all of this information, as well as the legislature and the State Board of as soon as the legislature and State Board of Education give us their respective approvals to move forward with the program. The second important announcement that I'd like to share is that Ohio's K-12 World Language Learning Standards will be refreshed beginning in the late summer of 2018, which is about a year from now. This will not be a major revision of our standards. Rather, we'll ask our stakeholders for feedback on the current learning standards, which in world languages have been generally very well received, and we'll make some minor tweaks and adjustments as needed. I mention this because we will need you to provide us with your feedback on our current standards. And eventually, we will need some volunteers from all languages to work with us on revising the learning standards by participating in either an advisory group or in a working group. We will advertise the need for your participation much closer to the time that we begin this work. But I want to present the topic now so that you can think about whether you might be interested in contributing to our profession in this way. Turning now to some important resources, I'd first like to make sure that all of the Chinese educators in the room are familiar with the Ohio Association of Teachers of Chinese, or OATC, as it's more commonly known. The Ohio Association of Teachers of Chinese was established in 2008 with assistance of the Ohio State University K-12 Chinese Flagship Program. It aims to provide a platform for teachers of Chinese to network and to share resources. I have been consistently impressed by the high level of professional networking as well as the quality of professional development opportunities being offered by this organization. If you're a Chinese language teacher and you're not a member of the OATC, I would highly recommend that you consider joining. The second organization I'd like to call your attention to is the Ohio Foreign Language Association, or OFLA. The OFLA is one of the largest and most widely respected state-level organizations working to support world language educators at the K-12 and post-secondary levels. Membership in OFLA is very affordable, and it affords you the opportunity to attend one of the very best state-level world language education conferences in the nation. It also connects you to all of the other world language teachers in the state via its listserv, and it is the mechanism that we at the Ohio Department of Education use to share breaking news and other opportunities with the field. I would hope that, as dedicated professionals, all of the teachers in the room will consider investing in membership in both of these organizations in order to better connect you to what is happening in our state and to network you with other amazing educators around Ohio. For anyone who is in the room and might be considering initiating a Chinese immersion program in your school or district, I would definitely point you to the CELIM, the Chinese Early Language and Immersion Network. The Asia Society established the CELIM to strengthen and expand Chinese language education in early childhood, primary grades, and in immersion programs. They convene and work together with practitioners, researchers, policymakers, parents, and advocates for language learning from across the U.S. and beyond. The Salon serves as a clearinghouse for information and resources related to Chinese early language and immersion programs. Please feel free to check them out at the URL address that I provided at the top of the picture. And I'm hoping that maybe this presentation will be made available to people who are in attendance today, so you can get this information. I would like to mention a program designed for any administrators or district decision makers who are in the room who have never had the opportunity to travel to China. Every fall, the College Board, in partnership with the Chinese Hanban, sponsors a greatly subsidized trip for administrators who would like to experience the language, the culture, and the educational system in China firsthand. The trip is designed to increase understanding and provide opportunities to forge ties with schools in China. For administrators who are trying to decide whether or not it's important to offer a Chinese program, it instills a true sense of understanding of the dynamism and the importance of modern China. Although it's a little too late to apply to participate this year, this opportunity continues to be offered on a yearly basis, and I want to plant the seed for anyone in the room who might benefit by participating in the program. ODE does advertise this program at the beginning of the application every year in its e-publications to administrators, such as the EdConnect. Please be on the lookout for the announcement for the 2018 Bridge delegation trip in late winter or early spring of next year. Finally, I would be remiss if I did not mention the many resources for Chinese teachers that are available on the Ohio Department of Education website. Those resources, and you can see them listed up on the screen, are all available on our World Language Model curriculum page. And you can see that there are many things up there for you, including a K-4 content-enriched Mandarin Chinese curriculum that we developed quite a few years ago with a major grant that we received from the federal government. For those of you who are thinking about implementing early language programs in your schools, the curriculum is done for you. All you need to do is get on our webpage, click, and it's right there for you. Oh, and I guess I didn't press the buttons that I needed to make all of those resources appear. All right. Well, my time is up, probably up long ago. So I'd like to finish by reminding you of one of the many sayings of Confucius. It is recorded that he once said, "The man who moves the mountain begins by carrying away small stones." If you're a Chinese student, some days it probably feels like learning Chinese is like trying to move a mountain, seemingly impossible. I want to encourage you again to stick with it, to overcome the challenges along the way and work on developing a profound love for this ancient language and culture. Your state and your country desperately need you to succeed and to use your linguistic and cultural skills to make this a better world. If you are a teacher or an administrator of a Chinese language program, I want to encourage you to keep climbing the mountains that challenge you throughout the year. I know that your challenges are many, but I also know that if you persist, as Confucius encourages us to do, and you tackle your challenges one small stone at a time, eventually your path will be clear. Thank you all so much for your very kind attention today. I shared a lot of information and hopefully inspired and encouraged you along the way. I'm grateful for all that you do. And I can only say, 谢谢. For